Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here. We're excited you're with us at the podcast, brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing. A little later, I'll be talking to Nick Voisard, the Senior Director of Electric Vehicles for National Express. But in the meantime, we have Mr. Ryan Gray, editorial extraordinaire. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Tony. Hello, Nation. Here we are. We're in the holiday season officially. Can't believe it. Another year is coming to a close very quickly, and everyone's out there getting ready for Christmas and Hanukkah and whatever you might celebrate this time of year. So I know that we here at STN are busy trying to gather information from everybody right now on decorations. Tony, so many times, folks out there, they decorate school buses, have them in parades. We get photos or see things on social media, out equipping the facility in the latest green and red and blues and all the holiday season colors. So if you have those photos, definitely send them to us. We'd love to get them up on our website, on our social media channels.
Yeah, I know. I've been getting text messages from folks. Hey, did you see our photos of our bus? And I was like, is there a Santa on that bus? And they're like, oh yeah, maybe we had a Santa. Maybe we did. And I was like, all right, good. So yeah, it's always fun to kind of dress the buses up and feel the holiday spirit. And the kids love it, right? It's all for the kids, Ryan. So everybody gets in the spirit of the holidays, and it's a lot of fun. I know there's a lot of giving as well. Obviously, children in needs, Toys for Tots. There's all the toy drives going on too. So those are always really good to kind of capture that. So if you guys are doing anything great at your district, please email us, let us know. We'd love to report on it, share it with the nation. It's always really good stuff, Ryan. And I don't know if you did your holiday shopping. I was like Cyber Monday, Black Friday, all that's kind of past, but we're starting to get the deliveries now, and it's like wrapping up for the kids, and it's really exciting. So always good to be in the spirit. But yes, we are like driving forward to get our 2023 buyer's guide done and get all the statistics and how many buses were built and what's happening lately and what are the trends. And Ryan, I think the big thing, and no big surprise, supply chain, right? I know as we get a lot of the data in, I'm anticipating not necessarily orders down, but the manufacturing to deliver is going to be down. We definitely see those in the public reportings of a lot of the companies. And I hear anecdotally all the time, oh, there's a part missing or a chip missing. Lead times. Obviously, with school bus electrification, we have very long lead times. And we're seeing rising costs, right? As inflation kind of happens, raw material costs go up, labor, shipping, everything to create the equipment. We're kind of just chasing the number. And I know with the EPA program, that $375,000 for electric buses and that $20,000 for infrastructure, it's not going to cover the cost as maybe we once thought. It would be a free bus or some free infrastructure. So there's a lot of considerations that districts need to make when they're looking at their kind of long-term outlook for how they invest in this technology. So lots of interesting stuff coming down the pike, Ryan.
Absolutely. Yes. It was so funny you mentioned this. I just finished my production article for the Buyer's Guides. That's going to be coming out January 1st online, and you'll be receiving that with the January issue in the mail. But that's what I'm looking at exactly. The effects of supply chain and inflation and high energy costs on manufacturing. And that's really what's hamstringing OEMs. We've seen a little bit of an increase over the past year, but we know that supply and demand is in effect, and of course that's what drives up costs, right? Well, we've also had this thing called COVID-19. We've had this war over in the Ukraine. We've had just kind of this perfect storm of things that have been happening to the global community. But in terms of supply and demand as well, the demand remains high, like you alluded to, Tony. School districts have money. They're pretty, cash rich right now after a couple of pretty good years in terms of sales tax revenues and property taxes. Of course, we have all this grant money that's out there. You referenced the Clean School Bus program. We still have folks that are using money from the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Fund. We have state grants. We have got DERA, the Diesel Emission Reduction Act. we've got more money coming from the Inflation Reduction Act that can go to electrification specifically. So, school districts are still making those orders, like you said, but OEMs just have been unable to fulfill them. Seeing some record backlogs from the OEMs that are reporting to us in terms of, not being able to fulfill orders. And we've heard stories over the past year of some school districts canceling orders because they're either taking too long, or most notably, they're taking too long and OEMs are coming back and adding surcharges, adding price increases. And, school districts, if they're not using this money from grants that don't have a stipulation on that have to be used in a fiscal year, if they're using regular money that does need to be used in a fiscal year, they can't all of a sudden just push that money to the next fiscal year. A student transporter told me the other day, the folks in finance hate that. So, some school districts are being forced to, forego a purchase cycle because the buses just aren't available. And yeah, certainly inflation is at play. Some of the positives that we're seeing out there, inflation does seem to be dampening some. I mean, it was at a high of 9.1% over the summer. It's come back down, but still, I think the experts are saying that despite what the federal government's saying, I think the Fed said that they're trying to get inflation back down to 2.8% by the end of 2023. I don't think any of the experts agree with that. I think that we're going to be seeing high prices at least for the next couple of years. But some of those pressures are alleviating some, but certainly, manufacturing costs still are very high right now. And I mentioned, energy, the cost of energy for manufacturing companies is through the roof. You mentioned shipping. Shipping has been, through the roof. It's come down lately, but both shipping and energy costs are at all-time highs. So, it's put so much pressure on the manufacturing, and they definitely need to catch up. School bus is always trying to catch up with the replacement cycle, try to get newer buses out on the road. We saw previously, coming out of the Great Recession, that school districts were the ones that didn't have the money to buy the buses. OEMs were ready to try to sell those buses, make those buses. Now we're seeing a flip where school districts have the money, but the OEMs just can't meet the demand.
Yeah, Ryan, one of the other interesting things kind of happening in the market, we saw Reverend Raphael Warnock won the Senate race, the runoff, basically in Georgia last week. And he's been kind of advocating for school buses, right? We've seen him visit Bluebird's plant there in Fort Valley. Also with control of the Senate, we'll see what that means as well, because Kamala Harris is obviously out there beating the drum for her passion and love for school buses. We'll see if that doesn't equal more funding for our industry over the next couple of years as a result of the election, right? So one can surmise that if there is a lot of funding that they're pitching inside government, school bus might continue to benefit from that. So we'll see how it plays out. Yeah. Definitely lots of things happening in the news cycle as of late. I know we talked a little bit last week about that special needs student that was attacked by another special needs student in South Carolina. And I've seen some reaction on social media from our post that, people were just sick to their stomach, that it's just gut wrenching to watch. And if you guys haven't seen it, please go over to stnonline.com, Longest Ride. It tells the story of a special needs student at the time who was 4 years old, a sweet little girl who was viciously attacked by a 9-year-old special needs student who was very sneaky and coercive, and the negligence that the district showed, it's just shocking. And I know, Ryan, you've been going out to the school transportation community to get reaction, and we're writing a larger piece. What have you gotten back from your constituency?
Well, basically a lot of the same, whether they be special ed directors spoken with or folks in the transportation industry. Like you said, it's just making them sick to their stomach. And that piece that we're looking at, it's going to touch on what happened, but I think we need to look at, going forward, how do we make sure things like this don't happen? And, we can't have our head in the sand. Unfortunately, there's probably more cases like this that haven't come to the light of day. This school district, Chesterfield County, South Carolina, I don't want to speak ill of them, but certainly, I know there's a whole new administration now in charge of things, but the news report definitely does not put it in a good light. And I mentioned this last week. I, know how production goes. I know how news infotainment goes sometimes. You can do some creative editing, but certainly some of the things that were in that news report were pretty damning. And I think it speaks volumes that the superintendent is no longer there. He's moved on to another district. The special needs director is nowhere to be found on the website. So, by the diligence and doggedness of the parents, I think they really brought it to light. But certainly, it certainly appears that the district kind of tried to sweep it under the rug. And how many times does that actually work? So, as an industry, it's a self-policing industry in so many respects, so many times. And so it's one of those things that reminds us that we have to stay on course, with the training, with the communication, the collaboration, especially coming out of an event like TSD conference, where we saw record attendance and really a big buzz of excitement. But then you see something like this and you remember that the work is never done, right? We have to just stay on course, keep our nose to the grindstone, and keep training folks, keep advocating for the children, advocating for transportation as a service, advocating for a place at the table, if not literally, figuratively, with special ed, with the administration, to make sure that information is being shared so that school bus drivers have the information that they need at hand to know what they're dealing with, especially when it comes to a special needs route and you have a nonverbal student on the autism spectrum, like this little girl, or this other student, the 9-year-old who perpetrated the violence, who evidently had some, emotional disturbances. And there was like 15 different red flags that were noted in either the student's IEP or in the student's record, but there was no child safety restraint systems for this child. There was no attendant on the bus. So these are the things that we have to shine a light on, and everyone needs to take a long look at the mirror and make sure, are we doing everything we can to make sure that something like this doesn't happen?
Yeah, and I think what really jumps out when you watch that video too is they're interviewing the superintendent. He goes, "Yeah, let's do a cost-benefit analysis of putting attendance on the bus." And during the report, they discuss how South Carolina is not required to put attendance on the bus with special needs students unless the IEP specifically calls for it. So, there's obviously politics involved, and politicians are trying to put forward legislation. And, the reporter challenges the Department of Education is, why can't you do this? Why don't you do this? And, I think really what struck me as very strange is after this incident happened, pretty much they did nothing to try to rectify the situation from happening again to another child. I mean, I think that's where the real negligence is that something goes wrong, you need to react. You need to put the checks and balances in place so it doesn't happen again. And the fact that months and months later, nothing happened, shocking, super shocking.
And a lot of states, don't require attendance. I mean, that's pretty common. I mean, that has been one of the transportation, positions that has been cut or reduced, and this has been going on for decades because of, unfortunately, money. And, but in a deposition to say that, I mean, it's like that's crazy. Another thing that was crazy to me was all this went on, and the school bus driver was the one who was brought up on charges, criminal charges. Obviously, yeah, it's bad. You see the guy, he seems like a caring guy. He just kind of seems just unaware, unfortunately. But you look at some of the decisions that were made way above his pay grade, that was kind of shocking to me too. But like you said, the state, South Carolina doesn't require attendance. There is a legislator who's trying to change that. And that's what one of the safety directors at the SCDE says to the reporter is basically like, he doesn't have the power to create that, but certainly they would enforce that, but it needs to be legislation. And, you know, it's something else that's interesting about that news report. One of the head trainers and transportation trainers at SCDE was made aware by the family of, you know, no attendance on the bus. And she was advocating, doing everything she could to try to push the special ed department to do something about it. And just, you could see the runaround that was happening. So again, you know, a very tragic incident, could have been worse, but certainly should never have happened. And hopefully, you know, by shining light on this, getting folks to, you know, come to TSD conference, read our magazine, engage with your state associations and your fellow transporters in your area, you know, talk amongst yourselves. How can you guys advocate for yourselves and advocate for the students, and just continue to get transportation issues in front of special ed and in front of administrators so that something like this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I mean, the topic been bubbling up about student discipline, Ryan, issues on the bus. You know, we see reports like this, incidents, and you don't want them to fall through the cracks, right? And TransFinder has taken a special interest in this issue specifically. They've created Form Finder, which makes a recording of these incidents easily so you can follow up easier, and it can be used district-wide. So when you have an issue with a child on a bus or in the classroom, key stakeholders can be kept in the loop. The goal is to keep the kids safe and to get to the issue as early as possible. Form Finder is embedded in TransFinder's Route Finder Plus solution. It's included free of charge. Its use goes far beyond student conduct. It can be used to customize any forms for your district's needs. Imagine one clearinghouse for all the district forms. You guys can learn more at getplus@transfinder.com or give them a call at 800-373-3609 and mention that you're interested in finding out more about the Form Finder to address those student behavior issues. All right, guys, let me get to my interview with Nick Voisard from National Express. All right, School Transportation Nation, want to welcome to the stage Nick Voisard from National Express. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Very happy to be here, Tony. Thanks for having me.
So for those of you who don't know, if you didn't pick up the magazine in October, you may have seen the Rising Stars article. And Nick is a rising star. He was nominated. He won, though he is the senior director of electrification. Emphasis on senior, right, Nick?
Get older by the day, Tony.
That's it. Well, Rising Stars, I guess, can be senior too. So we're excited to have you as one of our Rising Stars, and want to get a sense from you on kind of what that means to you and kind of what impact you're making at National Express, since you are handling all the EV implementation across the entire portfolio of vehicles, which is a lot of vehicles, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, it is. And you know, Tony, you and I, we go way back. I've been in this business since 2009. You know, you get into yellow and it just seems to hold on to you, right? And I'm grateful for every minute that I've had in it. You know, this opportunity came to me because I don't know if you recall, but a few years ago, I went and I left National Express for a short period and joined the Lion team to assist in some of their implementation programs, understanding more now about EV and where I am comfortable in my role and my expertise. I decided to step back into my business development role at National Express, which was a blessing. You know, I worked hard, and I was fortunate enough that when this opportunity arose, my boss came to me and he asked me if I would like to take on this challenge. And you know, I have 3 beautiful little children and a wonderful wife, and I know what electrification and clean school buses is going to mean for their future. You know, every day they're going to school on a diesel bus, and while it is cleaner than the ones you and I took, Tony, probably dirtier than I. You know, mine were dirtier than yours, I'm sure. But you know, at the end of the day, I'm very pleased with the impact I'm going to have on our future.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We're really grateful that you're with us today and sharing a little bit about what you're doing. And I kind of want to dive into a little more about the electrification side of things. Obviously, EPA Clean School Bus Act dropped $1 billion on the market, made the announcements. Now, how many of those recipients were National Express customers that you are working with to kind of deploy kind of the EVs in the market? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah. So we were fortunate enough to win 4 of our customers for a total of 77 buses. We won in Compton, Pontiac, Michigan, Blackstone Valley, Rhode Island, and Plymouth, New Hampshire. So we cover the entire country in our success there.
And then in terms of how many electric vehicles that you're running now, what does that kind of footprint looks like before those additional 77?
It's small. We today, for better or for worse, only run 9 electric school buses in North America. We were one of the first to pilot a program for V2G in White Plains, New York with 5 Lion Type Cs. We're now in the process of piloting another V2G program with DTE and Ann Arbor Public Schools in Michigan. So it's a small number, but I've been in this role since around April of last year, and I've been trying to get my feet and understand the lay of the land, understand where the grants are coming in, where the opportunities flow, meeting with customers, and fully determining who has a want to do this. I think that's the biggest piece, because we all know this is hard. It's something that is going to take time, and it's going to be a process that we're going to have to walk hand in glove together, or be hand in glove together through the whole thing. So a lot of the early stages this year have been educating myself in that process, understanding who the good contacts are, such as yourself, and what we can do to move this initiative further.
And I know there's been a lot of discussion about optimal geography and terrain. What have you kind of learned from some of those projects, like in White Plains? What were some of the things that came away where you're like, okay, these are good nuggets to kind of think about as we determine where we deploy these kind of assets around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. Climate's going to be your biggest challenge, right? I mean, where you're dealing with extreme cold or extreme heat, you're going to be running those ancillary services in your AC and your heat, and that takes a lot of power from the battery systems. So that's a big piece. Topography, right? Ups and downs. While we know that we get regen braking from the vehicle on those downs, we still have to get up that hill, and it's not a one-to-one in those scenarios. I'll tell you a funny story here if you've got a moment. So
yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So when I was at Lion, my sales manager at the time, his name was Adam. He and I went to a demo in New York City. And for the sake of the law, we apologize. We didn't know we were breaking rules when we took a 102-inch bus down to New York City. That's against the rules. Shame on us. Many apologies. But needless to say, we started in White Plains. That Lion bus is a 65-mile range bus, and we pushed that sucker to the limit. We had a charge plan. We came back to the Bronx Zoo. And when we got to the Bronx Zoo, unfortunately, all the chargers were broken. So we were sitting there with 24 miles of range and about 25 miles to go. And, we just held on for dear life and made it successfully. So, the lesson there that I want to harp on, getting back to the other challenges, is range anxiety, right? Everybody here is sitting back and they're saying, well, I can't run these buses on my routes. And the fact is that's not fully true, right? Today, we could easily, if I had to guess, probably take 60% of our routes and run electric vehicles on them. I mean, the way a route is designed, as you all know, AM route, midday downtime, PM route. There's time in that midday that if you need to juice it up, if you've got the right vehicle, that's going to be an opportunity. So range anxiety is something that we've worked really hard with school districts and customers to say, you don't need to go and be worried about this. The other piece of this that I've found as a challenge, and this is no knock on the OEMs. The OEMs are great. They're pushing an initiative. It's a hard process, but they're stubbing their toe too. They're finding different things and challenges, and they're making changes along the way. And we work with them, which is great. But this whole thing is a learning process. Again, being 12 years in the business, doing business development, I was used to going out, receiving an RFP, responding to that RFP, calling IC or Thomas or Bluebird and saying, hey, I need X amount of school buses. They put them on a line set. I got my buses. everybody was happy. This process is so much more drawn out. And the infrastructure piece is such a huge challenge. The vehicle piece can be a challenge. So I've loved learning all of that.
Now, the recipients that were the customers of the 77, are any of those rural districts?
Yeah, I guess I would say so. So Rumney, which is in New Hampshire, that one has some more rural routes. They actually have a route that goes on roads that aren't paved. So that's another one of those challenges. Obviously, it's not a big issue for a school bus, but you have to remember that these things are heavy in torque. Fortunately, all of the OEMs, when they put these together, they did keep electronic stability control on these vehicles. So that torque is well managed. So it's not a challenge. But yes, we do have some rural routes.
Got it. Now, one of the bigger factors that we've discussed is the Clean School Bus Act favors rural districts, yet it's very difficult to get infrastructure pulled to a rural district. So it kind of is counterintuitive in some respects. So what are some of the things you're looking at from an infrastructure standpoint? And that also comes back to working with your public utility in kind of axing the grid, because as we've discussed, maybe the lines don't charge to the level that you need, or they need a pole electrical. Well, if you're 100 miles from the closest pole, I'm sure the public utility isn't jumping up and down to pull a line set out to your yard 100 miles away because the cost is prohibitive.
Absolutely.
So what are those considerations that you're seeing that you think that you should have people thinking about?
Yeah, and that's a great point, Tony. So when we went through our initial EPA submissions, we only submitted 23 applications. And the reason we did that is because we were very strategic in how we went through the list. I wanted to have a high success rate. I didn't want to get people's hopes up. So I looked at the priority list. I looked at the rural list. I had good conversations with people. I paid attention to where they were. I had a school district customer in northeastern Ohio, and it's a very rural area and a great customer. I would love to give him school buses, but he's 15 miles outside of town. It's not going to be an easy process to get him electric school buses. Now, I can go to him and say, let's try one or two. We can work through one or two. I think we all agree that that is not as much of a challenge. But still, there was a lot of people in this first round, unfortunately, that I don't want to say were misled, but they went after funds because of the wrong reasons. They sat there and they said, I'm going to get a free bus. $375,000, I'm going to get a free bus. I'm going to get $20,000 for infrastructure. I'm telling you, that $20,000 is going to go like that. These larger implementations, 25 buses, that's $500,000. You're going to spend that in charging infrastructure alone. The trenching of the lines, some of the things you have to do on the site. There's going to be some other challenges there, and we're working creatively with our customers on that. We're coming up with designs that keep lines above ground and different track systems or mobile charging units in some regards. So we are working through that. But I'm not trying to put anything against the EPA. I just think that they wanted to get a big win, and they did. It's great. But I believe that they've learned that, these next few rounds, they're going to do some grant-based application programs, and we're going to be very successful in that. We spent a lot of time with customers. I'm in Michigan today, met with some folks on a great program with some customers that'll help us to move that program along much faster.
Yeah. So with the second round coming, which, there's a lot of hearsay. Is it going to come out in Q1 or Q2? So we'll see what it looks like. And I think as people kind of figured out the first round, now they're going to shake the box a little bit, and it's going to feel very different coming out the second way out. And I know there was a congressional hearing that we had listened in on where they talked about scrappage and some of the challenges with people not having the scrappage, which pretty much de-incentivize them to try to participate simply because they couldn't meet the test. So now we're going to see what the new program looks like. What do you anticipate? So you think it's going to come out looking like a grant program? Did you guys have some input with the federal government in terms of any of that?
There's been different conversations. I don't want to call it politicking per se, but a lot of those are those. I don't know if it's going to be a grant program, or I don't know if it's going to be a this. And so it's just kind of reading between the lines. They may do that. I think that the point here too is that if they come out in Q1, I'm not saying that it would be a challenge, but it is drinking from a fire hose, right? We're still dealing with the awards from this round, right? And setting up the different things. And I'll tell you today, we're looking at switchgear components that are 52 to 67 weeks away. We're not going to have any of these buses from this EPA program on the road by the first day of school. There may be some that have 1 or 2 assets and they can go out and buy a charger and plug it into a 240 line in their shop. And yeah, they'll have that success. But the big implementations are going to take some time. There's going to be some site design and some route analysis and some things that are going to make it take a little bit longer. And I think those things have come out in conversation from the rebate program. If you look at some of the questions over that period from May to August, you'll see that I think that there's been some hints to them that, like you said, about the scrappage of vehicles, right? Do you scrap them? Do you sell them? Where does that make sense? Wouldn't it be better if I could take, for example, buses in Compton, California that are newer assets, that are CNG assets, and move them to another school district that's running dirty diesel and kill 2 birds with 1 stone? So there's some things I'm hoping that they learn through that. That's really where it comes from. It's just more of an instinct and a Christmas wish, if you will.
That's all right. That's why we have you on here, just so you can prognosticate what you think potentially might happen, right?
That's right. Nick Voisard quotes.
That's it. Rising stars' opinions matter. So we want to be sure we get your voice and hear that out. And probably my last question for you would be, can you talk to a little bit about the relationship with the public utilities? What does that relationship look like? Because you're going in multiple states. I assume that some people are on the ball, other people are kind of behind the 8 ball. What have you felt in terms of those relationships? Maybe New York's a great example, since White Plains is you're trying to do a V to G, right? Like, yeah. How's the exchange of power between you guys going? Is that project, meeting your expectations?
Right. And Tony, as a matter of fact, you understand this very well. You were at some of these conferences I've been at. I look at California and they have make ready programs. They're pushing the agenda. Obviously, they have some bigger challenges with the grid, but they're putting funding into implementing those programs. New York, I think, you remember that lady stood up there and they discussed, well, when they made the mandate on 2035, did they discuss any of this with the utility? And she was, no way. So, there's some of those things that have been done ahead of time. Now for our part, that's the first phone call we should be making. In cases, obviously, where it's a smaller implementation, 1, 2, 3, it's not as big of a deal. But in the bigger ones, we have to make that call first. And it's because they control, everything. We need to know if it's even feasible. And that's going to be a big part of it. I wish I could remember, Tony, the statistic that the gentleman from Bird Bus had thrown out about how much power it would take to electrify all the buses in New York State. And it was like twice the amount of power that Long Island, New York has on a regular basis. Like it was pretty astronomical. So this is going to be a big hurdle. As a national company, we also operate in Canada, right? And Quebec has made some major strides in that, but they run on hydrogen. Their program is government funded in a different way, and they're moving toward it at a faster pace because they've got a different infrastructure. It's not as old as ours. So we're working through some of those things for sure.
Well, excellent. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and imparting some knowledge on us about what's going on at National Express in the EV realm. Really exciting times. A lot of districts are looking towards this, and I'm sure you have customers that are calling, inquiring, who are curious, right?
Absolutely. Well, like you said, we're seeing more and more of the bids that are coming out from customers with language that's requesting that they can explore an EV transition. They want to understand what their power needs would be, what a pilot would look like. So yeah, it's coming. It's very exciting. I think everybody understands that today we're educating kindergartners that we don't know what their future is going to be. We're trying to educate them for that. We should also be planning to transport them like that. So it's extremely important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nick, for coming on and sharing. We appreciate you, and have a happy holiday, my friend.
Yes. Happy holiday to both of you. Thank you so much.
Hey, great conversation today. Special thanks to Nick Voisard from National Express, Mr. Ryan Gray, our always impressive editorial expert, and thanks to our sponsor, TransFinder, for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. We appreciate it very much. Guys, you can visit stnonline.com for all the latest and greatest happening in the school transportation industry. Also, don't forget, share the podcast, get it out there. LinkedIn, Facebook, you can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. Nation, we love you. Happy holidays. We'll see you next week.